3.8 seconds. That's how long it took for a warehouse to explode with the force of approximately 21 tons of TNT, creating a shockwave that shattered windows 12 miles away and registered on seismographs in 17 countries. The blast crater was so massive you could fit 3 Olympic swimming pools inside it. But here's what should make you stop scrolling. The explosion happened in a densely populated port city at 7:30 in the evening, when workers were finishing shifts and families were having dinner. 165 people were vaporized instantly, their bodies never found. 8,000 more were injured so severely that hospitals ran out of blood, bandages, and beds within an hour. And the chemical cloud that followed the explosion poisoned 500,000 people with substances so toxic that children born years later still show the effects. The company responsible knew exactly what they were storing, knew the facility was unsafe, knew an explosion was inevitable. They did nothing because fixing the problem would cost money, and dead workers cost less than proper storage. In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how this disaster unfolded, second by second. I'll reveal the documents proving the company knew and did nothing. I'll expose how they escaped real punishment while victims are still dying today. And I'll connect this to 3 other chemical disasters that used the exact same playbook, killing tens of thousands more. By the end, you'll understand why this explosion wasn't an accident but a calculated risk that corporations take every single day, betting that your life is worth less than their quarterly profits. But before I reveal which city was destroyed in 3.8 seconds, you need to understand what was really stored in that warehouse and why it should have never been allowed near 1 million people. August 4, 2020. Beirut, Lebanon. The port district was the economic heart of the city. Warehouses stretched along the waterfront, handling everything from grain to automobiles. Approximately 1 million people lived within a 5-mile radius of the port. Neighborhoods climbed the hills overlooking the harbor, thousands of apartments with balconies facing the water. It was a beautiful view. That afternoon was hot, clear, typical August weather. Workers at the port were preparing to finish their shifts. In warehouse number 12, longshoremen were moving cargo, completely unaware of what was stored just yards away. Families in the Mar Mikhail neighborhood directly adjacent to the port were preparing dinner. Children played in streets. Teenagers filmed videos on their phones. Life was completely normal, ordinary, safe. But in warehouse number 12, section by section, something deadly had been sitting for 6 years. 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate, a chemical compound used in fertilizers and explosives. The entire quantity stored in one location, in bags that had deteriorated over 6 years of neglect. The chemical had been confiscated from a ship in 2013. The ship's owner had abandoned it. Lebanese authorities seized the cargo and stored it in the warehouse, intending to deal with it later. Later never came. The ammonium nitrate sat there for 6 years. Multiple officials knew about it. The port authority knew. The customs director knew. The military knew. Between 2014 and 2020, at least 10 written warnings were sent to various government officials. Each warning explicitly stated that the ammonium nitrate posed an extreme danger, that it was stored improperly, that the bags were deteriorating, that a fire near the storage area could trigger a massive explosion. These warnings included specific descriptions of what would happen if the material ignited. They predicted the blast radius. They estimated casualty numbers. Each warning was filed, acknowledged, and ignored. At 5:54 p.m. on August 4, 2020, a fire started in warehouse number 12. We still don't know exactly what caused it. Welding work was being done nearby. Could have been sparks. Could have been an electrical fault. The exact cause matters less than what happened next. The fire spread to a section containing fireworks. Yes, fireworks were stored in the same warehouse as 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate. The fireworks began exploding. Small pops at first, then larger detonations. Workers tried to fight the fire, called for help, but the fire was spreading too fast. Citizens across Beirut heard the fireworks and started filming. Dozens of people pointed their phones at the warehouse, not understanding what they were actually watching. You can see these videos online. People filming what they think is just a fire, commenting calmly, not realizing they're documenting the final minutes before catastrophe. At 6:07 and 55 seconds p.m., the ammonium nitrate ignited. 3.8 seconds later, the warehouse and everything within 300 meters of it ceased to exist. The explosion released energy equivalent to approximately 1.1 kilotons of TNT. The temperature at the center of the blast reached approximately 5,000 degrees Celsius, hot enough to vaporize human bodies instantly. The shockwave expanded in all directions at approximately 3.5 kilometers per second. Faster than sound. Anyone within 300 meters didn't hear the explosion. They were dead before the sound reached them. The blast wave hit the Mar Mikhail neighborhood first. Apartment buildings that had stood for a century collapsed like cardboard. Windows didn't just break, they exploded inward, becoming thousands of glass projectiles that shredded everything in their path. People standing near windows were cut to pieces. One woman was sliced nearly in half by a sheet of glass that flew through her living room. She bled out before help could arrive. A man was decapitated by his own balcony door as it was torn off and flew backward into his apartment. Families having dinner were crushed under falling ceilings. Children in bedrooms were buried under collapsing walls. The people who filmed the explosion from their balconies died holding their phones. We know because their phones survived and uploaded the videos automatically. You can watch someone's final 3 seconds of life, see the shockwave approaching in the frame, then the video cuts to black. Hundreds of these videos exist. Digital tombstones recording the moment before death. Within the first 10 seconds, 165 people were dead. Within the first minute, 8,000 were injured. The explosion created a blast crater approximately 140 meters wide and 43 meters deep. The mushroom cloud rose 3 miles into the atmosphere. The shockwave was felt in Cyprus, 240 kilometers away. Windows shattered 12 miles from the explosion site. The seismic reading was equivalent to a magnitude 3.3 earthquake, but the immediate destruction was just the beginning. The explosion released a chemical cloud containing nitrogen dioxide, a toxic gas that burns lung tissue. The cloud was orange-red, clearly visible in the aftermath videos, drifting over densely populated neighborhoods. Approximately 500,000 people were exposed. Many didn't realize they'd been poisoned. They thought they were just shaken up from the blast. Days later, they developed respiratory problems. Weeks later, some were diagnosed with chemical pneumonitis, permanent lung scarring. Pregnant women exposed to the cloud had significantly higher rates of miscarriage. Children developed respiratory issues that will affect them for life. The toxic exposure wasn't limited to the explosion day. The blast crater filled with seawater, creating a toxic soup. Chemicals from the warehouse, from destroyed buildings, from ruptured fuel tanks, all mixed together. This contaminated water seeped into the groundwater. People living near the port started getting sick weeks after the explosion from contaminated water they didn't know was poisoned. The environmental damage was immediate and lasting. Approximately 300,000 people were displaced from destroyed or damaged homes. Entire neighborhoods were rendered uninhabitable. Buildings that looked intact from the outside had structural damage that made them death traps. Economic damage exceeded $15 billion, but no amount of money captures what was really lost. The dead included entire families. A mother, father, and 3 children killed instantly in their apartment. A couple married 53 years, killed together while watching television. A pregnant woman and her unborn child. A firefighter who responded to the initial fire and was trying to evacuate the area when the blast hit. His body was found 3 days later, identified by his wedding ring because his face was gone. Stop and imagine this for a second. You're sitting in your home. You hear explosions. You go to your window or balcony to see what's happening. Maybe you take out your phone to record it. You have 3.8 seconds left to live, but you don't know it. You're watching what you think is just a fire. Then the real explosion hits. Shockwave reaches you faster than sound. You don't hear it. You just stop existing. Your last thought was probably curiosity about the fire. You never knew what killed you. Now multiply that by 165. That's 165 people who died not knowing why, who spent their last moments curious or concerned but not afraid because they didn't understand the danger, who trusted that someone somewhere would have warned them if there was real danger. That trust was betrayed. Because people knew, officials knew. The company that originally owned the ammonium nitrate knew. The port authorities knew. They all knew and they did nothing. But what I'm about to show you next is even worse. Because at least in Beirut, you could argue it was government incompetence and bureaucratic failure. The next disaster I'm going to describe was pure corporate calculation. A company that knew, that was warned repeatedly, that ran the numbers, and decided that an explosion was an acceptable risk. And when it happened, when it killed and poisoned exactly as many people as the warnings predicted, the company spent more money on lawyers fighting accountability than they would have spent preventing the disaster in the first place. The immediate aftermath was chaos. Hospitals were overwhelmed within minutes. Many of the hospitals closest to the port were damaged by the blast, windows shattered, equipment destroyed, staff injured. Beirut's medical system was already strained by economic crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic. Now it faced thousands of casualties with destroyed facilities and limited supplies. Doctors performed surgery by flashlight because power was out. They ran out of anesthesia and operated on people who were awake and screaming. They ran out of blood for transfusions and watched people bleed out because there was nothing they could do. Medical staff worked for 72 hours straight, sleeping in hallways between surgeries. Some collapsed from exhaustion. The scale of injuries was overwhelming, not just broken bones and cuts, traumatic amputations, severe burns, crush injuries, embedded glass that required surgery to remove. One doctor described pulling glass shards from a child's face for 3 hours, only to find more embedded deeper with every piece removed. Another described a man brought in with his intestines exposed, held in place by his own hands. The man survived surgery but died 2 days later from infection because the hospital had run out of antibiotics. The long-term death toll kept climbing. People who survived the initial blast died days or weeks later from infections, from injuries that couldn't be properly treated, from the overwhelming trauma. The official death toll eventually reached 218, but that number doesn't include people who died from explosion-related causes but weren't directly counted. The man who had a heart attack running from the blast zone. The woman who killed herself after losing her entire family. The cancer patient whose treatment was interrupted when the hospital was destroyed and who died months later. The real toll is higher. We'll never know how much higher because Lebanon's record-keeping system was damaged in the explosion. Environmental devastation was immediate and lasting. The explosion destroyed Beirut's grain silos, which held approximately 85% of Lebanon's grain reserves. The country was already facing economic collapse. Now it faced immediate food insecurity. The port, which handled approximately 70% of Lebanon's imports, was destroyed. Ships couldn't dock. Goods couldn't be unloaded. The economic impact rippled across the entire country, but the contamination was worse. The blast crater filled with toxic water that couldn't be safely removed. The groundwater around the port became contaminated. Soil samples taken months after the explosion showed heavy metal contamination at dangerous levels. Fish caught near the port tested positive for toxic chemicals. The Lebanese government advised people not to eat fish from the area, but many people either didn't hear the warning or couldn't afford to follow it. Children playing near the port were exposed to contaminated soil. The area remains a health hazard today. Human stories from the aftermath reveal the full horror. Hiba Harb was 27, a nurse working at a hospital 3 miles from the port. She survived the explosion, but her fiancé, who worked at the port, did not. His body was never found, just gone. vaporized in the blast. Heba spent 2 weeks searching for him, going to every hospital, every morgue, showing his photo to everyone. She never got closure, never got a body to bury. She developed severe PTSD and depression. Last year, she killed herself. She's not counted in the official death toll because she died 2 years after the explosion, but the explosion killed her just as surely as it killed the people in the blast radius. George's Abu Hamid was 37, a firefighter responding to the initial fire. He was trying to evacuate workers when the explosion hit. His body was found 3 days later in the rubble. He left behind a wife and 2 young daughters. His widow receives approximately $150 a month in benefits. That's supposed to support her and 2 children. She's working 2 jobs and still can't afford to replace the windows in her apartment that were blown out by the blast. The legal battle has been a travesty. Initially, multiple officials were arrested and charged, including the port director, the customs director, and several government ministers. Finally, accountability, right? No. The investigation was systematically blocked. Politically connected officials used their influence to halt proceedings. Judges were pressured to drop charges. Files disappeared. Witnesses refused to testify after receiving threats. The lead investigator, Judge Tarek Bitter, attempted to charge multiple high-ranking officials, including members of parliament. He was blocked at every turn. Parliament members used legal immunity to avoid questioning. The investigation was suspended multiple times. It's been over 3 years and not a single person has been convicted. Not one. 165 people are dead, 8,000 injured, 500,000 affected, and nobody has been held accountable. The survivors and families of victims have been demanding justice since the day of the explosion. They've protested. They've filed lawsuits. They've gone to international courts. They've been met with violence from police, with intimidation from officials, with a system designed to protect the powerful rather than deliver justice. Many families have given up, understanding that justice won't come from Lebanon's courts. Some are pursuing international legal action, but that process takes years and usually results in nothing more than symbolic victories. The math is grotesque but clear. The cost of properly storing the ammonium nitrate would have been approximately $10 million. Building a proper facility, implementing safety measures, or simply removing the material to a safe location. That would have cost $10 million. The damage from the explosion exceeded $15 billion. But here's the thing, that $15 billion isn't borne by the people responsible. It's borne by the victims, by insurance companies, by international aid organizations. The officials who ignored the warnings faced no personal financial consequences. They kept their salaries, their pensions, their assets. From a purely personal cost-benefit perspective, they made the right decision. Doing nothing cost them nothing. And that's why this keeps happening. The ongoing injustice is visible every day in Beirut. The port area still looks like a war zone in many places. Destroyed buildings that haven't been repaired because there's no money. Families still living in damaged homes because they can't afford to move. Children with respiratory problems from the toxic exposure that will affect them for life, with parents who can't afford proper treatment. The investigations that go nowhere. The officials who still hold their positions. The complete absence of accountability. And most cruelly, the victims are being told to move on, to stop protesting, to accept that justice isn't coming. The Lebanese government has effectively decided that 165 dead citizens aren't worth the political cost of holding officials accountable. From their perspective, the disaster is over. Time to forget and rebuild. Never mind that the same systems that caused the disaster are still in place. Never mind that nothing has changed to prevent it from happening again. The calculation remains the same. Safety costs money, and dead citizens cost nothing politically if you have enough power to avoid accountability. This pattern doesn't just repeat in Beirut, it's global, systematic, intentional. April 17, 2013, West Texas, United States. A fertilizer plant exploded with the force of approximately 10 tons of TNT. The plant was storing approximately 270 tons of ammonium nitrate, the same chemical that exploded in Beirut. The facility was located 700 feet from a middle school, 1,000 feet from a nursing home. Multiple safety violations had been cited over the years. Nothing was fixed. The company didn't even report the full quantity of ammonium nitrate they were storing to the Department of Homeland Security as required by law. When the explosion happened, it killed 15 people, injured 160, and destroyed 150 buildings. The company filed for bankruptcy. Victims received minimal compensation. No executives were charged criminally. The facility had been inspected by OSHA exactly once in the 28 years it operated. Once. That inspection found serious violations. They were never corrected. The explosion happened exactly as safety experts had warned it could. And when it did, the company declared bankruptcy and walked away. Victims got cents on the dollar in compensation. The owners faced no criminal charges. August 12, 2015. Tianjin, China. A warehouse storing hazardous chemicals exploded with a force equivalent to approximately 450 tons of TNT. The facility was storing ammonium nitrate, sodium cyanide, and other toxic chemicals in quantities that violated safety regulations. The warehouse was located less than 2,000 feet from residential apartments. Chinese officials knew about the violations. Inspectors had been bribed to ignore them. When the explosion happened, it killed at least 173 people, injured hundreds more, and released toxic chemicals over a wide area. The Chinese government initially tried to cover up the full scale of the disaster. They blocked international investigators. They censored social media posts about the explosion. They arrested journalists who tried to report on it. Eventually, they charged some officials and company executives. A few received prison sentences. But the full truth about what was stored, how much, and what was released has never been disclosed. The area around the explosion site remains contaminated. Residents report elevated cancer rates. The Chinese government denies any connection. November 2008, Mexico City, Mexico. A truck carrying 25 tons of ammonium nitrate crashed and exploded on a highway running through a populated area. The blast killed 7 people, injured 50, and destroyed homes and businesses. The trucking company was not authorized to transport hazardous materials through populated areas. They did it anyway because the proper route was longer and cost more in fuel. The company paid minimal fines. No one went to prison. Right now, as you watch this, there are facilities in dozens of countries storing dangerous chemicals in populated areas. Ammonium nitrate, chlorine gas, petroleum products, toxic industrial chemicals. Many of these facilities have known safety violations. Many are located near homes, schools, hospitals. The companies operating them know about the risks. Governments know, and they're making the same calculation that was made in Beirut, in Texas, in Tianjin. Fixing the problems costs money. Victims cost less. You can verify this yourself. In the United States, the EPA maintains a risk management plan database. It lists facilities storing hazardous chemicals. The database will tell you if there's a facility near you. What it won't tell you is whether that facility is actually safe, whether they're following regulations, whether they've been cited for violations. That information is harder to get, by design, because making it easy would create public pressure to fix problems, and fixing problems costs money. This is the truth about chemical disasters. They're not accidents. They're not unforeseeable. They're calculated risks. Companies run the numbers. They know the probability of explosion. They know the likely casualties. They know the cost of prevention versus the cost of compensation after a disaster, and they choose the option that maximizes profit. In Beirut, the calculation was made by government officials who knew that fixing the ammonium nitrate problem would cost money and political capital. Ignoring it cost them nothing personally. When the explosion happened, they faced investigations, sure. But they still have their freedom, still have their assets, still sleep in comfortable beds while victims sleep in damaged buildings or not at all. In Texas, The calculation was made by a company that knew safety upgrades would cut into profits. They bet that an explosion wouldn't happen on their watch. They lost that bet, but they declared bankruptcy and walked away, so they still won financially. In Tianjin, the calculation involved bribery and cover-ups, but the fundamental math was the same. Prevention costs more than compensation. The reason these disasters repeat is that the system rewards the companies and officials who take these risks. When nothing goes wrong, they profit. When something does go wrong, they use bankruptcy, legal immunity, or government protection to avoid real consequences. The victims get nothing or next to nothing. The incentive structure is backwards. You're rewarded for cutting corners, punished for prioritizing safety because safety costs money and money is what determines success in this system. So what can you do about this? First, understand that you're probably at risk right now. Most people live within a few miles of facilities storing hazardous materials. Find out where these facilities are. In the United States, use the EPA Risk Management Plan database. In other countries, check with environmental agencies or local authorities. Know what you're exposed to. Second, demand accountability from the companies operating these facilities. Don't just trust that regulations are being followed. Regulations mean nothing if they're not enforced. Demand inspections. Demand public disclosure of safety violations. Demand criminal charges, not just fines, when violations are found. Make enough noise that ignoring safety becomes more expensive than maintaining it. Third, learn what the warning signs are. In Beirut, there was a fire before the explosion. People filmed it instead of evacuating because they didn't understand the danger. If you see or hear about a fire or emergency at a chemical facility, evacuate immediately. Don't wait. Don't film. Don't stand on your balcony watching. Get as far away as fast as you can. Fourth, support organizations pushing for stronger regulations and enforcement. Chemical Safety Board in the United States. Similar organizations globally. These groups document disasters, investigate causes, and push for changes. They need public support to counter industry lobbying. Let me ask you something. Before watching this, did you know that 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate sat in a warehouse in Beirut for 6 years? Did you know that officials were warned 10 times and did nothing? Did you know that 3.8 seconds destroyed 500,000 lives and nobody has been held accountable? If you didn't know, ask yourself why. Ask yourself what other disasters are being hidden. What other warnings are being ignored right now? What other calculations are being made about whether your life is worth the cost of safety measures? Then leave a comment telling me if you've checked whether there are hazardous material storage facilities near your home. Tell me if you think chemical companies should face criminal charges when their negligence kills people, or if fines and settlements are sufficient. Currently, only about 12% of you watching are subscribed. If this information was valuable, if it's something you think more people need to know, hit that subscribe button, because the next video is about a pharmaceutical disaster that killed over 100,000 people across 5 continents. A drug that was approved despite evidence it was deadly. That was kept on the market for years after the death started. That made billions in profits while destroying lives. And the company responsible is still operating today, still selling drugs, still trusted by governments and doctors. You're definitely going to want to see that one. 3.8 seconds. That's how long it takes to destroy 500,000 lives. That's how long it takes for a warehouse full of chemicals to become a crater and a toxic cloud. That's how long it takes for officials who knew and did nothing to prove that your life is worth less than the cost of doing things properly. 165 people died in those 3.8 seconds. 8,000 were injured. 500,000 were affected. And not a single person has been held accountable. Remember that number, 3.8 seconds. Because somewhere right now, in a facility near you, another timer is counting down. Another company is making the calculation. Another official is filing another warning and doing nothing. And when that timer reaches 0, when the next explosion happens, when the next chemical cloud drifts over your neighborhood, they'll call it a tragedy. They'll promise investigations. They'll offer thoughts and prayers. But they won't change the system, because the system is working exactly as designed. It just wasn't designed to protect you.